feel like I can say I know God exists and I know I exist, and there's a separation there, which I'm open to questioning, given that it doesn't really make sense to me that there would be two existences. It seems that there would have to be one existence, one reality. But there's also a resistance to questioning or attempting to collapse that duality.
Why a resistance? I mean, you're asking a question about it, so you must also be interested in exploring.
I am. I guess I feel I can say that I am one with God, but that I can't say I am God. I think you mentioned, you used the word consciousness as a synonym and awareness, and God was sort of also at that level. And so I think there's a part of me that's assuming that God, or the absolute or source, is that which consciousness is a part of, but not consciousness itself.
Okay. Well, I totally understand that to say I am God doesn't sit well with us.
Yeah.
So that we don't say that. So it's difficult to explore what God is, because it depends on what we think God is. But what we can explore is ourself. That's something we know we can do, because ourself is present. So start with exploring yourself. The question is what is the relationship between yourself that you know very well and God, which you have a strong feeling for, a strong intuition of, but you feel you don't know it quite as well as you know yourself. You can speak with confidence about yourself from your own experience, but you don't feel you can speak with confidence about God. So start with yourself. And without referring to all the non-dual literature that you've read in our previous conversations, tell us what you know about yourself.
I am aware.
Yes. So I am. So I am present. I am being. Mm-hmm. But I'm not an inert being, I'm an aware being. That's mm-hmm. what you mean when you say, I am aware. Mm-hmm. So tell us more about that.
I exist.
If we're going to be really scrupulous about language, something that exists from the Latin ex sistere means to stand out from, ex meaning out of, and sistere meaning to stand. So something that exists is something that stands out. And something that stands out has a form. So a thought exists, a table exists, a feeling exists, a room exists. Something that exists is always something with a form. It stands out from its background. So your thoughts exist, your feelings exist, your sensations exist, your perceptions exist. You don't exist, you are. You don't stand out from the background of yourself. All your thoughts, sensations and perceptions stand out from the background of you. You are the background they stand out from. So you don't exist, you are. This is a fine distinction. Most people use the word being and existence synonymously. And it's okay to do that in casual parlance, but we're going more deeply into things here. So when you say I exist, I think you really mean is I am. Okay. So I am and I am aware. What else?
There's not much else I can say.
Okay. That distinction between being and existence will come clearer. Its relevance will become clearer when we start exploring what God is. But let's stay with yourself for the moment. There's not much else you can say. Okay, why is there not? You're right, but why? Why can't you?
Any qualification I make on that is just not true. It moves. It's a time-bound phenomena.
It's a time-bound phenomenon. It must have a form.
Yeah.
And if it has a form, it has a limit. And if it has a limit, it comes and goes. But your being is ever present. Have you ever experienced the absence of yourself?
No.
No. So in your own experience of yourself, you are ever present, not everlasting in time, because as you say, yourself has no objective qualities that could exist in time. You are ever present now. So if you've never experienced the disappearance of yourself, have you ever experienced the appearance of yourself? Was there a time when you appeared? Did you ever have the experience of appearing? No. No. Only something that exists appears, like a thought appears, and then it disappears. But you have never had the experience of your own appearance or disappearance. You never experienced your own birth. You will never experience your own death. So in your own knowledge of yourself, you are eternal, ever present. You are without birth. Birth is not your experience. Appearance is not your experience. You are without death. You've never experienced your own disappearance. So if you stay very close, I'm just formulating now what you've said of yourself. If you stay close to your experience of yourself, you could say, I am aware, I am eternal, I wasn't born, I don't die, I find no limits in myself. Common way of saying that is, I am infinite, I am not finite, I have no finite qualities. So I am infinite, I am eternal, I am deathless. This is your experience. It's not some marvelous mystical experience, it's just our experience of ourselves. So now tell us what you imagine God to be. What would be the first quality?
Eternal.
No, but even before that, the very first thing you can say about God.
I was going to say God exists.
But now you're going to say...
But now I'm not going to say that.
Now you're not going to say that. But instead you're going to say...
God is.
God is. Perfect.
Period.
God is. God doesn't exist. Everything exists in God, or emerges out of God. Ex sistere, stands out from, but God itself doesn't exist. God is. What else?
God is eternal.
Yes. Okay, let me ask you the question. In whose experience is God eternal? Who is it that can say God is eternal? Whoever that is must be the one that knows God. Something that doesn't know God cannot know that God is eternal. So in whose knowledge is God eternal? Only God could know that God is eternal. At the moment we're not sure that you're the same as God or not. We don't know that yet.
Right.
So you, this possible entity that is separate from God, cannot say anything about God. Only,
Correct, yes.
only God could know
Yes.
the nature of God, just like only you can know the nature of yourself.
Yeah.
So before God knows that God is eternal or ever-present, God must have another quality apart from simply being. God is not inert being. God must be aware.
Mm-hmm. I think this is where I get stuck.
Okay.
Because it seems like I'm projecting what I know about myself onto whatever this is that we're calling God.
Yes, but we're exploring what God might be.
Okay, yeah.
So whatever God might be, God must first be.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And must not God also be aware? Otherwise God would not know anything. God would not be aware of itself, or indeed of anything else. If God had to give itself a name, what would God call itself? What is the name that anything knows itself gives to itself? What is the name you know yourself, and what is the name you give to yourself? The ordinary name you give to yourself.
I?
The I.
Yeah.
Anything that knows itself calls itself I.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Anything that is known by itself calls itself I. If a tree could know itself, it would refer to itself as I. In order to call ourselves I, we have to both know ourselves and have the ability to name ourselves. A cat knows itself, but it doesn't have the ability to call itself I. But a cat knows itself. If a tree could know itself, it would call itself I. So if God knows itself, what would it call itself?
I.
I. So God would say, I am, and you also say, I am. And when you refer to I am, you refer to your knowledge of yourself. When God says I am, God refers to its knowledge of itself. So at the moment we have these two beings. You have the being that you know as I am, and we have the being that God knows as I am. What's the difference between them? Given that you've already said from your own experience that your own being has no limits, that it's ever present, birthless, deathless, and without limits. What would be the difference between your being and God's being?
I guess what's coming up is I didn't do this. I didn't make the something that is here, or I'm not its originator, I'm not its source. So it's something about creation and how that works.
How do you know that the being, which is the essence of yourself, didn't create all of this, or isn't creating all of this?
I'm not having the experience of creating it.
When you have a dream at night, do you have the experience of creating your dream?
Not unless I'm lucid. Usually not.
But even if you're lucid dreaming, do you still have the experience that you're witnessing your dream, or that you're actually creating it?
Usually witnessing, unless I'm able to create a scene.
Yeah, okay. But normally you have a dream and you don't feel you're creating it.
Right.
Although your mind is creating the dream.
Right. That's interesting.
Let's take a slightly different pathway. Consider the possibility that there is a single being, a single infinite, indivisible being, out of which emerges, or everything that exists. When something emerges out of being, it stands out from being and it exists as an object. So all objects, whether they're galaxies or atoms, or they all exist, but they emerge out of the same being. In other words, being lends itself, so to speak, to everything that exists, including yourself. But whatever this little package of yourself is, it borrows its existence, its temporary existence, this little package of thoughts and feelings and sensations, it borrows its temporary existence from a single being. Could that single being be what God is?
Yes.
And could the knowledge I am be God's being shining in your mind? When you refer to the pure I am doesn't actually share any of the limited qualities of your thoughts, feelings, sensations and perceptions. It is unlimited being, infinite being. But how many infinite beings can there be?
Just one.
Yes, so the knowledge that shines in each of our minds, the knowledge I am, that shines in each of our minds, it cannot be a different being, because the being that each of us knows that we are is unlimited. You've already discovered when you refer to I am, it's unlimited being. So the I am that shines in each of our minds must be God's presence, shining in this limited vessel. It's like the space in this room. How many spaces are there in the universe?
Just one.
There's one space in the universe. There isn't one space for every building in the world. There is a single space that is temporarily housed by every building. I would say it was exactly the same with God's presence, infinite being. There is one being that is temporarily housed in our body-mind and shines in that body-mind as the knowledge I am. If it's true that the being, the sense of being that shines in each of our minds is the only being there is, let's call it God's infinite being, we know the experience I am. Yes, you know the experience I am. Now, what is it that knows the experience I am?
I do.
And is the I that knows that I am the same I that I am, or a different I?
It's the I that I am.
The I that I am knows that I am. So when I think you've got the answer. To say I am God does indeed sound arrogant. No one in their right mind would ever say such a thing. It doesn't feel right to say it. It feels like blasphemy. But in fact, what is blasphemy is not to say I am God. What is really blasphemous is to say I am a person. That is blasphemous. Because in saying I am a person, what we're saying is that I am a being with my own independent existence. We're saying that my being must be separate from God's being. And if my being is separate from God's being, then God's being must be limited. In other words, to say, I am a person, is to deny the presence of God. It is to set oneself up as a self, apart from God's infinite being. Or rather, let's not call it God. It is to set oneself up as a being apart from infinite being. It is to set oneself up as a finite being. And if each of us are finite beings, then there cannot be anything called infinite being. Because if infinite being is infinite being, it must be the nature of all being. But if we are setting ourselves up as a separate, temporary, finite being, we are denying the possibility of infinite being. We are denying God's presence. It is not arrogant to say, I am God, although we shouldn't say it. What is arrogant is to say, I am a person. That is arrogant. We have never for a moment been anything other than this being, this infinite, self-aware being. There are no other beings that it would be possible to be. Just as the space of this room is and has always been and will always be the only space there ever is in the universe, a single, infinite, indivisible space. So the being in each of us, or rather the being that is us, is the only infinite, self-aware being that there is. God's infinite being. We do not become this through a practice of meditation or a spiritual tradition. It is simply ignored and then remembered, veiled and then revealed. But it is not veiled by something other than itself. There is nothing other than itself with which it could be veiled. Our own being veils itself with its own activity. This pure knowing or pure consciousness assumes the activities of thinking and perceiving, and as such seems to endarken itself with its own creativity, its own activity. And then as this activity relaxes, its essence or nature shines. Its essence or nature has not been transformed. It has not evolved. It has not become enlightened. Our being, which is not our being. In other words, our being doesn't belong to us, a person or a body. We should just say being, infinite, self-aware being, which shines in all our experience, but is not limited to our experience, is always in the same condition. Like the space of this room, it is colorless, transparent, empty, luminous, knowing, imperturbable, lacking nothing. Nothing that ever happens in experience adds anything to or removes anything from this infinite self-aware being. It is inherently complete, fulfilled. The common name for this completion or fulfillment is simply happiness, or the absence of lack.